everyone. I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And I want to take you on a little trip before I announce our table topic for this show. Imagine waking up on the morning after the election. This is the election that was supposed to decide the direction of your city, decide the direction of your school board, your state, or your country. And you realize that your voice didn't actually count, that your vote did not count. Not because you didn't go to the polls, because you did. Not because you didn't stand in line, because you stood in line. You did your civic duty. You cast your vote for the future you believed in. But imagine finding out that while you were standing in line, there was a dozen of people who were also standing in that same line who aren't citizens of this country. People who have no stake in our country, who have no legal right to your future or our future as a whole. But we're all standing in lines across the state, preparing to all do the same thing. Imagine a gut punch when you realize that your vote, that the votes of your neighbors, those who served in our military or worked for 40 years to build this community, were mathematically erased, canceled out by a system that cares more about the convenience than it does the American citizen. There isn't just a clerical error that you can just wipe away. It's the worst case scenario for free people. When we stop requiring proof of citizenship, when we stop valuing the very thing that makes being an American special, if anyone can walk in and pull the lever or push the button or write down their selection, then the consent of the governed becomes a hollow phrase. It's the slow, silent theft of our sovereignty. And if we lose the belief that our elections are decided by Americans and for Americans, then we lose the glue that holds this republic together. Once that trust is gone, it doesn't come back. And today's table topic is the Save America Act. We're talking about why we have drawn a line in the sand as Americans. How did we get here, and do we really need it? When I say how we got here or how did we get here, I'm referring to the place that now we're discussing making a federal mandate that every state requires proof of citizenship in order to vote. For decades, this has been the law of the land that you must be a citizen to vote in federal elections or any of our elections. That's not new. We've had the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act since 1996. But here's the problem. Under the current system, specifically the NRVA, or the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, states are actually prohibited from requiring documentary proof of citizenship when you register to vote for federal offices. Instead, it's basically based on an honor system where you check a box saying you're a citizen or you're not, and that's it. Well, I recently, during this State Board of Elections meeting that I sit on, I recently saw cases of people who did check the box that they were not a citizen, but somehow was registered to vote anyway. And we didn't find out until 12 years later when their name came up on a jury registry list. And then they checked that they were not a citizen, so they can't participate in jury duty, which then triggered the county, Fulton, to then look at this person to see, why are they on your registration list? Why are they on your voter rolls? That recently happened this month, February 2026. We heard that case. Before we address what has been presented as a remedy, which is the Save America Act, We have to look at the actions that have led up to the need for this remedy. So let's look at the mechanics and how does a system designed for a different era become a playground for fraud today? So it's not just one thing. It's this perfect storm of four things converging into a crisis. You have massive illegal immigration, you have inflated voter rolls, weak verification rules, and the outdated federal law that ties the hands of states. If you want to understand why the Save America Act is the only way out, you have to see how these pieces all fit together, starting with the border. We are seeing millions of people entering the country. Now, where do they go? They go to get a driver's license, keeping in mind being a non citizen doesn't always mean illegal. However, when you are a non citizen, you are allowed to obtain a driver's license. And under the NVRA, the National Voter Registration Act, often called the motor voter, states are required to offer voter registration at the DMV. However, in the state of Georgia, we have a system where you are automatically opt in. Where I know my husband, who's running for Secretary of State, Kelvin King, stated that he wanted to ensure that he petitions the legislature to make that an opt out. In other words, you are not automatically opt in and registered to vote. Matter of fact, you're automatically not registered to vote unless you decide that you want to opt into the system. That is the way it should be. But as of right now, every single person who gets a driver's license is automatically opt in to vote. And in many blue states, non-citizens are given licenses that look nearly identical to yours. When the clerk says, "Would you like to register to vote?" and there's no requirement to show a birth certificate, the door is just wide open. So a non-citizen might not realize that they're breaking the law. They check a box. They're on the rolls, and the system just accepts it. That is the first crack in our foundation. As I stated, here in Georgia, we have the opt-out option, which means that you don't click a small box to say that you want to register to vote. You click a small box to say that you do not want to register to vote, and then you're automatically registered. So that's a huge problem. Now, once you're on the voter rolls, they stay there. Why? Because the NVRA makes it extremely difficult for states to clean their lists. But it's not impossible. Although we have a lot of people who act as if it is, it's not. Voter roll maintenance is absolutely possible. However, because of some of these laws and some of these decisions and bad leadership, we have zombie voters or ghost voters. These are people who have moved or may have died, or yes, non-citizens who were added by mistake. And when you have rolls that are sitting at 110%, or like we found in Fulton County, Georgia, at 115% of the actual population of the county, you've created a warehouse of ghost ballots just waiting to be used. But here's the kicker. Even if you have ghosts on your rolls, if you have these voters that do not exist on your rolls, someone has to cast that ballot in order for it to begin to be fraud. So this is where weak signature verification comes into play. Because in many jurisdictions, signature matching is the only line of defense in mail-in ballots. Over the years, the left has fought against signature verification and requested requirements be lowered based on their arguments that this line of defense is somehow weak because election workers are not trained handwriting experts. They believe signatures are naturally inconsistent. And the usual argument is that it is disproportionately impacts minorities, calling it a hidden literacy test that unfairly targets specific groups. So yeah, if you know how to sign your name and you can sign it the same way every single time so that there can be signature verification, somehow this then correlates back to minorities. And I am so tired of being the scapegoat as a Black person. I'm so tired of this narrative that we are so stupid and dumb and ignorant individuals that we just can't seem to figure out how to do anything. The same people whose descendants were connected to the 4 million slaves that were emancipated, who had to go out and find their own way, which figured out how to read, how to start businesses, how to raise families, how to assimilate into this country. Now, all of a sudden, here we are in 2026, and we're not intelligent enough to know how to do the basic fundamentals that it requires as an American. I'm so tired of it. So this is not a hidden literacy test requiring signature verification. However, these leftist, dare I say, absolutely racist individuals who look at Black people as some type of, and not just Black people, but any type of minority group, whether it be women, Hispanics, Asians, Indians, Blacks, any minority group, all of a sudden, we're just all dumb. We're just all dumb. And me being a Black woman, God forbid. But they believe that signature verification targets minority groups. They believe it targets people who learn to write in a different script, or for whom English is their second language. They feel like they would have a different variety of signatures, which is so crazy to me, because I haven't met anybody who just comes up with 5 different signatures. Yeah, your signature can be a little sloppy every once in a while, but it's typically your signature. I digress. But you have younger generations who were never taught to write cursive in school. So they believe that this often is a lack of having a formal signature. And for those that have changed their names or is in the process of transitioning, they think that this is somehow going to affect them as well, because they may have signatures that are no longer a match because they've changed their name. However, if you've changed your name, regardless of what the reason is, you typically start by getting a driver's license, and then you sign your new signature. So now you have a new signature that's there. And if you require everyone who registers, who gets a driver's license to also be registered to vote, then you should have their updated signatures. But yet, this is the argument that's being made. And the list can go on and on and on of the excuses as to why they believe that we need to get rid of signature verification or not make it as serious as it is. But let's be honest. In some places, the rules have been watered down so much that the signature is even vaguely similar, it's counted. And we saw that in 2020, when the rejection rate of signatures was so much lower than it has been in any other time. But here's a worst case scenario of fraud. Imagine a high-rise apartment complex or a nursing home where there are dozens of non-citizens or moved voters who are still on the voter rolls. Let's just say the Secretary of State decides to mail absentee ballot applications to every registered voter, like we saw in 2020, meaning a house with 7 people registered to that address will receive 7 applications. Although there may only be 1 person or 2 people living there, given many people move out without changing their address, or they did change their address, however, it didn't get picked up because they didn't move to a state where the ERIC system can catch them. And it's so difficult to get yourself off the voter rolls that they attempted to do it and said, you know what, this is too much, so they just let it be. So now they've remained on the voter rolls. Then comes this ballot harvester who collects all the unclaimed mail-in ballots, scribbles a signature that likely won't be challenged because we're weakening signature verification, and then they drop the ballots into a drop box. Now all of a sudden these ballots are mixed in with all these legit ballots, and there's no way of knowing, because once that ballot is separated from that envelope, there is absolutely no way of knowing who is who. So then boom, election fraud has occurred, and someone or multiple people's votes are now canceled out, and now their votes are mixed in with yours, and there's just no way to uncount them. Now think about the world we live in today. We have a historic border crisis. We have millions of people entering this country. When you combine that with the push for automatic voter registration at the DMV and the honor system that they are not, that's not so honorable, it isn't just outdated, it's a massive loophole. So the Save America Act that was introduced by Representative Chip Roy and supported by leaders like Speaker Mike Johnson was born out of this simple realization that trust is good, but verification is better. And as my husband always says, we trust, but we verify. You've probably heard things like, oh, non-citizen voting is so rare. I've gotten into a back and forth with a Democrat appointed member of the Georgia State Election Board when she wouldn't support our request to have larger signs prohibiting illegal voting in the precincts. Her argument was that this was not happening. What we've heard cases as late as 2025 and now 2026 of people, particularly a woman who's from the Bahamas, who voted 23 times illegally and had been in our country for 30 years. You can't say it's rare because only a few people have been caught. You don't have an idea. They don't have any idea of how many people are here, and especially how many of them are voting, because they don't have a good method of catching it. But seriously, ask yourself, how do we actually know if we aren't allowed to ask for proof in the first place? Or if our system that requires them to provide proof is flawed? In comes the Save America Act. Now that you know why a solution is necessary, and that this narrative that the act is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist is a complete total lie, after the break, we're going to go through the Save America Act and attempt to understand what it means, the opposition's response to the SAVE Act, and what we, the people, should be doing in the meantime. We're just getting started. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't leave the table. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. This is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned for family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is understanding the Save America Act in our elections. During the last segment, we discussed how we got to this boiling point because it didn't happen by accident. We were looking at the perfect storm, 4 massive cracks in our foundation that have turned our election into a playground for potential fraud. First, we have the border crisis, millions of people entering the country, and thanks to the 1993 Motor Voter Law, or the NVRA, they are being funneled through the DMV. In states like here in Georgia, we have an opt-out system where you're automatically registered to vote unless you check this little tiny box that says, no, I don't want to be registered. And when non-citizens get licenses that looks a lot like ours, the door is just wide open. It's almost like it's on a conveyor belt. But then secondly, we have inflated voter rolls. Because the federal government makes it nearly impossible for states to clean their lists. We have counties in Georgia sitting at 115% registration, meaning that over 100% of the people who live in that county are registered to vote. It means there's like 15% of people on that roll who are either passed away, moved, or ghost voters. That's a warehouse of ghost ballots just waiting for the mailbox. Third, we have a weakened defense. We've watched the left lobbyists water down signature verification, calling it discriminatory. But let's be clear. If the signature matching is weak and the rolls are full of people who moved or shouldn't be there, then the guardrails are absolutely gone. And lastly, we're operating on this honor system. Right now, the federal government prohibits states from asking for birth certificates or passports. It's almost like it's a trust me system in the world where trust is at an all-time low. So that brings us to the remedy. If the problem is a lack of verification, the solution has to be a mandate for proof of citizenship. And that brings us to the SAVE Act, or what is really called the Save America Act, which happens to be under scrutiny. Not because over 80% of Americans support it, but because Trump and his administration is behind the development. And there are several people who will find a problem with anything that he does. But before we examine the opposition, we got to discuss the act itself so you can be fully aware and fully understand. The Save America Act isn't just a suggestion, it's a total overhaul of our security protocol that is absolutely necessary. First, let's give you the full name of the Save America Act. It stands for Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. That's what SAVE stands for. Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. At its core, it does one primary thing. It amends the 1993 NVRA, or National Voter Registration Act, to close that loophole that prevents states from asking for proof of citizenship, which I thought it was absolutely insane, because we do this in Georgia. We do ask for citizenship in Georgia, but I didn't know there were states that did not. It takes us from this honor system to a verification system. And it essentially says, if you want to vote in a federal election, you must prove you are an American citizen first. The plan isn't just to add a line on a form. It's a complete security overhaul that has 3 different pillars. The first is the front end verification. It requires documentary proof of citizenship at the time of registration. No more just checking a box at the DMV. Secondly, roll maintenance. It mandates that the states use a federal database specifically for DHS and Social Security Administration to audit their current rolls and remove any non-citizens immediately. This is a system that has always been up. However, from my understanding, I think there was a cost associated with it where now it's free. So now every county can just enter their voter rolls in that system, scrub it, and see how many non-citizens come up. Third, this new Save America Act is a strict enforcement. It introduced criminal penalties for election officials who knowingly register someone without proof. It makes the law mean something again. So how does it work for you, the voter? So if the Save American Act becomes law of the land, the requirements are very clear. You would need to present, and that usually means in person, one of the following to register: a U.S. passport, a birth certificate, one that matches your current name, or a nationalization certificate, or a military ID if accompanied by a record showing your U.S. birth. And for those who say, if I don't have those papers handy, what do I do? The Act directs states to create a backup process where you can provide a signed attestation under penalty of perjury, but you'll still have to provide secondary evidence to the state official who has signed off on your citizenship once you have it. And I asked the question about whether or not it was retroactive because I've heard a couple of people say that if you're currently on the rolls and you're a citizen, you're good to go. But I asked a congressman directly, is this retroactive? And he said no. If you're currently on the rolls, that's fine. That means that you have shown some form of citizenship. However, there may be a requirement to show proof of citizenship again, if need be, so that you can maintain being on the rolls. But I believe that's still being worked out, and we're not sure how that's going to play out. But I was told that it will not be retroactive, and it's not an automatic just because you're voting now and you're on the voter rolls. But those who are not registered at the time the law goes into effect, they're going to absolutely have to follow these guidelines. So where do we stand? Is this act a law, or is it not, or will it become one? What's the latest update? Well, as of February 2026, we are in the heart of the battle. The House of Representatives just passed the latest version of the Save America Act on February 11, 2026, with a narrow vote of 218 to 213, which is crazy to me. It was a nearly party line vote with Republicans standing firm. However, Democrats, led by Schumer, vowing to fight it tooth and nail in the Senate, did not support as much as it should have been, considering so many people and so many of the American people agree that we should have this. President Trump has made this a top priority in his second term, calling it a common sense measure supported by 80% of Americans. The bill is now heading to the Senate, where we face a 3-seat Republican majority because of the 60-vote filibuster, and the path is extremely tough. But the strategy right now to avoid this is to implement a talking filibuster, which we had in the past. Republicans want to force the opposition to stay on the floor and explain to the American people why they are against requiring a birth certificate or proof of citizenship as a whole to vote. So as I stated before, the line in the sand has been drawn. The House has acted. Now it's up to the Senate to decide. Do we protect our citizens' vote? Or do we leave the door propped open and hope to God everyone is honorable? But will it work? If it was to pass, will it work? Or will it create more barriers without being effective? Here's exactly how it fixes the crisis we just discussed. Number one, mandatory proof. It ends the whole checkbox era. To register, you must show a passport, a birth certificate, a naturalized document. No proof, no registration. Period. No more, we're hoping you're telling the truth. Number two, this act will clean the warehouse. It gives states the tools and the requirement needed to use the federal database like the DHS SAVE system, which everyone should be using right now, to scrub non-citizens off the voter rolls now before they are sent a ballot. So we're cleaning house. And lastly, this rule or this law, if should it come into effect, will provide criminal teeth. It will give you teeth to the argument. It doesn't just nicely ask, are you a citizen? And let me know, it's all up to you, but you let me know. It establishes criminal penalties for not just those who vote illegally, but the officials who fail to do their job, who knowingly registers non-citizens. Some may call this extreme, but elections are extreme. They're extremely important. And I just call it common sense. We require a real ID to board a plane to Florida. Why on earth wouldn't we require one to decide the leader of our country or our community? Like I said earlier, we trust, but we verify. The SAVE Act finally puts the verification back into the hands of the American citizen. It's up to us to determine who votes in our elections. It's not up to any of these crazed people who thinks that our country is too strict, although they've benefited from the beauty of our sovereignty. It's not up to them. It's up to the American citizen. And the American citizen says that in order to vote in our elections, you must be a citizen. And the SAVE Act is essential to closing up those loopholes. It amends that 1993 law to finally allow and require states to see a birth certificate, a passport, some type of certificate, something, before adding them to our voter rolls. It will also do the number one thing that we need right now in this country. Passing the Save America Act will restore a level of confidence in our electoral process that has been lost. A huge part of the division in our country comes from a lack of trust in our institutions. If we want Americans to believe in the results of their elections, we have to prove that the process is secure. And the reason why there are so many people who don't believe in our elections right now, it's not solely because they automatically think that the election was stolen. It has a lot to do with the fact that they just have simple questions that they want to be answered. In order to answer them, we have to see the source documents that the Fulton County elections continue to hold. Well, now they don't because the DOJ and FBI has it. But all these years, that's all people were asking for. Is to show me proof. Don't force me to take your word for it. I don't elect people to represent me by not talking to me and telling me that I have to take your word for it rather than ask for proof. I should be able to ask for proof. Every single time an ineligible voter casts a ballot, it effectively cancels out the vote of a legal American citizen. And protecting the value of your vote is the ultimate form of voter protection. But unfortunately, in politics, every great idea comes with a bunch of haters. So let's address some of the haters and their narratives. The opposition to the Save America Act has been loud. But if you look closely at their arguments, they're paper thin. They don't really have a foundation to stand on. So let's go through some of the top 4 talking points that the left is using to try to stop this bill and why their logic is failing the common sense smell test. The first thing they'll say to you is that non-citizens voting is a myth, which we already addressed. They say this never happens. They love to say things like it's exceedingly rare. But I'm here to say that you can't find what you aren't looking for. Because right now, because of this 1993 motor voter law, states are literally prohibited from verifying citizenship on the federal form. So they have an honor system. But when states do look, they do find the cracks. In Virginia, they had to remove over 11,000 non-citizens from their rolls. In Iowa, a 2024 audit found hundreds of non-citizens registered and dozens had already cast ballots. In Georgia, as I stated before, we're hearing cases as early as this past week of the airing of this show where there were non-citizens voting in our elections. So just because the left wants to ignore the smoke doesn't mean that the house isn't on fire. And it's so rare. And if it's so rare, then why are they fighting so hard to make sure we can't verify it? Here's another favorite headline. 21 million Americans don't have these documents. What? They want you to believe that tens of millions of people are walking around with no birth certificate, no passport, and no way to get one? But here's the truth. The 21 million number is based on a nearly 20-year-old survey that has been widely criticized for its methodology. In reality, according to the Census Bureau, over 90% of Americans already have at least one form of photo ID. And more importantly, the Save America Act includes a safety valve. If a citizen truly cannot find their birth certificate, their driver's license, their social security number, or anything else that validates that they're a citizen, then the bill does allow for an attestation process, which is that form that you can fill out that properly explains and makes it certain that you are attesting to being a U.S. citizen. Now, if you lie on it, it's a whole other beast. But there is a safety valve for those who cannot seem to come up with any proof of citizenship. So this isn't about blocking citizens, it's about stopping the non-citizens who have surged across the border over the last 4 years or who have overstayed their visas, who could possibly interfere in our elections. You'll hear the left say things like, this bill targets married women because their birth certificates don't match their current legal names, and they claim 69 million women would be blocked from the voting rolls. Well, this is pure fear mongering. But as a woman who is married and has been, I can tell you that changing my name was not that big of a deal. The Save America Act explicitly accounts for name changes. If you have a marriage license or a court order, documents women already use to get their driver's license and passports changed when they get married, then you are covered. We've been verifying names of passports and real IDs for years. And to suggest that the American woman can't handle a paperwork update to secure their vote is frankly insulting. To suggest that she can't change her name and go on vacation with her husband because in order to fly, you have to have a driver's license. And God forbid you want to leave the country, you got to have a passport. So I guess you're saying that all of these women are just going to be stuck here in this country, unable to do anything because they can't seem to figure out how to get a form of ID or prove that they're who they say they are post getting married. Well, finally, they argue that this is just too costly, it's too burdensome, because we're living in the land of the convenient elected official, the lazy elected official who doesn't want to do much. Don't inconvenience me. We'll inconvenience everyone else, but not me. Or we have government workers who are just lazy, who have gotten accustomed to this terrible, weak culture of serving citizens with less than the respect that they deserve. So this is too burdensome for them. It's too burdensome for the election offices to implement. They say that it's going to slow down the DMV and create these long lines. Since when is the cost of doing business an excuse to leave our elections vulnerable? We spend billions and billions of dollars on foreign aid and these green energy subsidies, but we can't afford to verify that only Americans are voting, especially when we have over 80% of Americans, including the majority of independents, requiring proof of citizenship. The burden the left is worried about isn't the burden of paperwork. It's the fact that a clean, verified voter roll makes it harder to play games with the margins. Now let's close this segment by tackling the biggest buzzword that's being thrown around by opposition. And we want to be very clear. I, too, am not in support of nationalizing our elections. I do not believe that's the right thing to do. But if you listen to the talking heads on the other side, they'll tell you that the Save America Act is a federal power grab designed to strip states of their constitutional right to run elections. They're painting this picture of a federal takeover, but if you actually read the Constitution and the bill, you'll see that that's not just a stretch, it's a total lie. Let's set the record straight on how we got here and why the nationalization label doesn't stick. This argument started because of a specific clause in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4. It states that state legislatures get to decide the times, place, and manner of elections, but it also says Congress may make or alter those regulations at any time. So the left is arguing that by setting a uniform standard of proof of citizenship, the federal government is overstepping. They claim that since states have historically handled the how of registration, a federal mandate nationalizes the process. Now, even some of us, and as I stated before, there are people, of course, on the Republican side that are against nationalizing elections, but that is not what this does. The reality is that the federal government already nationalized the floor of our election security back in 1993 with the NVRA. But under the Save America Act, the federal government isn't counting the ballots. It's not hiring the poll workers. It's not deciding where the precincts are. States are still administering every single aspect of their election process. The bill simply sets a minimum security standard for the most important part, ensuring that the person in the booth is actually a citizen. And it's really sad that we have to come to this. And the SAVE Act focuses on federal elections. The Save America Act specifically targets federal offices, president, senator, a congressman. Since these are national offices, it is entirely within Congress' constitutional authority to ensure that the people electing them are eligible under national law. There's a difference between nationalization and standardization. We have a national standard for clean air, for civil rights, and food safety. It's not nationalization. That's setting a national standard. We don't call those a nationalization of our lungs or our dinner table. We call those baseline protections. So the Save America Act provides a baseline protection for Americans to vote. It says that no matter if you are in Georgia, California, or Maine, your vote should not be diluted by a non-citizen because of a loophole in a 30-year-old law. So the truth is that those who are criticizing this, they're not afraid of nationalization. They're afraid of a uniform standard that they can't use to their advantage in states where they have lax rules. They want a patchwork of vulnerability, and we want a wall of security. There's a major difference. So after the break, summed up the responsibility of the voter, as well as why this issue must be a priority to all of us. We're going to discuss that after the break. We're almost finished. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't leave the table. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. This is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. In today's table topic, we're talking about the Save America Act. And before the break, I laid out the perfect storm of why those 4 massive cracks in our foundation have led us to a need for the Save America Act, such as the border crisis, inflated rolls, weakened signature rules, and outdated honor system that was implemented in 1993. It's now time to talk about the fire extinguisher. We're talking about the SAVE Act, or the updated version, which is now known as the Save America Act. This bill is completely under a microscope right now, and not because the American people are divided on it, because over 80% of us, all across the parties and different viewpoints, actually support it. But it's under scrutiny because it's the centerpiece of the Trump administration's fight for election integrity. And we know that there's a segment of DC that will fight a sunny day if they know that President Trump, was the one who was forecasting it. This isn't just a suggestion, it is a total security overhaul built on three pillars: front end verification, real time voter roll maintenance, and criminal consequences for those who break the law. We already discussed exactly what we, the voter, will need to have ready if this passes, and especially if you're not currently registered to vote, such as passports and birth certificates. We close the segment by debunking some of the opposition, the narratives, and about how right now the fight is located in the Senate and it's up to them. I wanted to leave you with something that goes beyond the text of a bill or the vote in the Senate. Because protecting this republic isn't just the job of a politician in DC, it requires personal responsibility from every single one of us. There's a universal rule in politics that when the people, we the people, drop the ball on our duty, the government will always pick it up. Voting isn't just a choice, it's a duty. It's the price of admission for a free society. But right now, we are being forced to play the role of the adult in the room. That means demanding standards when everyone else is shouting for convenience. We are told that we can't remove the threat. We are told that we have to accept a border that is wide open, a system that invites vulnerability. Well, if you won't allow us to remove the threat, then we have been forced into the position where we have to protect our country from the threat. It is us saying that our sovereignty is not up for negotiation, our votes are not up for erasure. We must stand tall, we must stay firm, we must stay informed. And remember that if we don't guard the gate ourselves, nobody will. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.